everyone, I'm Lauren and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about my reading statistics for 2019. I personally really like statistics and things. It's kind of fun to look at all the different numbers, and even if I don't really do much with them, it's just kind of interesting to look at the numbers and compare your reading year with other years and just see trends, and I think that's pretty cool. I had only been keeping track of my reading on Goodreads for a few years. I started more keeping track in 2016, but 2016 I didn't really read that much, and 2017 I also didn't read a heck of a lot. So I really only have 2018 and 2019 of proper data to look at. But we'll use what I have and we'll take a look at what there is to look at and just do the best that can do. And before I get started into stats and things, just give a heads up, I'm sorry if there are construction noises in the background. They've been doing construction all day, every day for a while, and I need to record a video and there's just no good time to record. And also this should be the last video that I do in only voice and no proper video. I had a few troubles and hopefully the next video should actually have proper video, assuming I did it fine. Anyway, enough babbling and such. Let's get on to the actual statistics. Alright, just first off, in 2019, I read a total of 127 books. It is definitely a lot of books. It is a little bit more than I read in 2018, 121 books in 2018, and a lot more in 2017 with 62. So I don't know how 2020 will go for reading, because we're only in February as of this recording, but if the trend continues, it looks like I might be at my comfort level at around 120 books. It's kind of hard to infer that from only 2 proper years of reading, because 2017 is a weird kind of year, but I wanted to bring it up anyway. As far as page count goes, in 2019, I read a total of 38,368 pages. This is a little bit more than 2018 at 34,782, and it's a lot more than 2017 because I didn't read as much in 2017. Average page count also went up. In 2019, I read an average of 302 pages per book. 2018 was 287 pages per book, and 2017 was 238 pages per book. So even though I read more books, they were also bigger as well. Not really a huge amount, really, because it's only about 20 pages, a little bit less than that between 2018 and 2019, but it's still an increase, so that's kind of cool. Just really briefly, rating-wise, in 2019, I had an average rating of 3.66. In 2018, it was an average of 4.24 stars, and 2017 was an average of 4.16. It is a bit of a drop in rating, but I think that makes sense. Once we look at genres and things, you'll see that I branched out a little bit more than normal. So when you branch out, there's a really good possibility that you're gonna hit some books that you don't like very much. And I think that's just kind of the thing that happened. I may have also been a little bit stricter with my ratings, because I think in 2018 and 2017, almost all of the ratings were skewed to be above 3 stars and then barely any below 3, whereas I am a little bit more cautious about rating something 4 or 5 stars unless I really like it. As far as the type of books read, in 2019, I read 68 novels, 44 manga volumes, and 15 graphic novel volumes. So I read a huge chunk of manga, but it is mostly novels. This, I don't know if this is surprising or not, but it is definitely surprising when you compare to other years. So as you can see from this overview chart, even though I read a similar number of books from 2018 and in 2019, I read a significant chunk of manga in 2018, almost entirely manga. And manga is pretty easy to read in comparison to the novel. Nothing wrong with reading manga, because obviously I still read a lot of manga. But I think it's pretty crazy to think that I still read so many books in total, yet I read a lot more novels than I did in 2018. And I think that's pretty good. I think I had been in a bit of a slump sometime in the middle of 2017 and earlier, just because of university being really stressful. So I think this kind of shows that I have gotten a lot more comfortable with reading again, and that's really nice. I think manga really helped break out of that slump, and that's just why I read so many. Now onto some cool pie charts. Let's talk about the types of books I read, the genre-wise. This is including novels, graphic novels, and manga. So for the books I read in 2019, 87 fantasy, 9 historical, 8 contemporary, 6 science fiction, 5 mystery, 4 comedy, 3 nonfiction, 3 romance, 1 thriller, and 1 anthology. And also keep in mind that these are a little bit loosey-goosey genre categories. I don't like to make secondary genre categories for things because it just complicates things, and so I just put everything into the best category I can think of. So yeah, I read a lot of fantasy. It's just kind of crazy. Without this chart, I wouldn't have been able to guess on how big of that chunk fantasy would have been, but 87 to then 9 is quite a big jump. To break down the fantasy chunk a little bit more, here's another chart with the audiences that the fantasy ones are made for, I guess. 51 YA, 20 adult, 10 light novel, 5 middle grade, and 1 children's book. And yeah, I don't read a lot of middle grade, and I don't read a lot of children's. I'm not really surprised about that, because I have a hard time with children characters a little bit. Also, I want to point out I put light novels in as an audience because it's not a genre, really, and it's not a format either, because I call them, they're just novels, really. So I just kind of put them as an audience here, because they kind of vary a little bit between adult and YA a little bit. I guess I could throw them into YA, but I think this is a bit more descriptive and useful for my purposes. So these 2 pie charts were for all of my reading, so I wanted to look at only novels and just kind of see how much manga and graphic novels skewed it. So just looking at novels, it is still predominantly fantasy. I think it looks like percentage-wise it's probably more. It looks like 3/4. 52 fantasy, 5 science fiction, 3 contemporary, 2 mystery, 2 nonfiction, 1 thriller, 1 anthology, 1 historical, and 1 comedy. So I branch out even less, really, when it comes to novels, and I'm not surprised about that. I might want to try and branching out in 2020. I'm still not really sure because there's a lot of series that I want to finish in 2020. And of course, almost all of them are fantasy because that's what I've started. And yeah, most books don't change genre in the middle of the series. And also, here's a look at the breakdown of the audiences of the fantasy novels. And here you can see that YA was dramatically cut down percentages wise. We have 19 YA, 17 adult, 10 light novels, of course, that stays as there, 5 middle grade, and 1 children's book. So it's about a third YA, a third adult, and a third between light novel, middle grade, and children's. So it's actually fairly even. I mean, I read a lot less children and middle grade, but that makes sense for me because I have not really found too many middle grade and children's books that I have enjoyed. So comparing a little bit genres across years, I don't have a chart for this because it was a pain to try and figure out and I don't know how to make it look nice. But across every year, I pretty much read predominantly fantasy, so that really has not changed at all. In 2019, though, I read more other things than any other year. For example, in 2018, I read from only 4 different genres, whereas in 2019, I read from about 10 different genres. So I really branched out a little bit, I guess, even if it's into the manga. There is some weird ones here and there, like in 2018 I read a lot of mystery, but that was mostly manga, as you can see if I look at the overall genres for just novels, still predominantly fantasy across all the years, basically. But there's still some variety in genre in 2019, whereas not really that much at all. Actually, I think only one book outside of fantasy just for novels in 2018, and 2 in 2017. So even if I still mostly branched out in manga and graphic novels in 2019, I still branched out more in novels in 2019 than I had in any other year. Still though, with sci-fi, that's not even that impressive. Like 5 more, wow. But all of the sci-fi I read were novellas. So I still need to work a little bit more on my genre range, perhaps anyway. So if we take a look at the sources, so where I got the books that I read, in 2019 I read 103 books that I owned, either like I purchased that year or I owned previously from other years. I read 12 from Hoopla, 8 from the library, 2 off of Audible, 1 I borrowed, and 1 I read online. So just some sort of online source that doesn't really fit into anything else. If you compare that with previous years, that's pretty much on par. I mostly read books that I own, but in 2019 I did read a little bit more outside of just what I owned. So even though I didn't read much that outside of what I owned, I still read more library books than Hoopla books than any other years. In fact, I started using Hoopla in 2019. So for formats, in 2019, I read 95 physical books, 30 ebooks, and 2 audiobooks. Not really that surprising to me, because I do prefer physical if I can. Although, since I did read some books from Hoopla and library, that will make up a chunk of that ebook portion. And yeah, this kind of trend a little bit continues in past years, although I've definitely branched out a little bit more into ebooks in 2019, as almost an entirety of my reading in 2018 and 17 were physical books. But I think that's partially due to how much manga I read. Well, because a lot of manga I can't read digital unless I buy them myself, and at that point, if I'm gonna buy the manga, then I'd much rather have a physical copy, because it's easier to look at like that, in my opinion, whereas it's a lot easier to read ebooks when they're actually when they're novels in an ebook format for me. I wasn't really sure what to expect with author genders, because I don't really keep too much track of that in my mind. I haven't really made a goal to read a certain number of male or female or non-binary or that kind of thing. But looking at the chart here, it's actually pretty even between male and female authors. 64 male, 60 female, and 3 that were both. So it was multiple authors for one book, and they happened to be at least one male and at least one female. So it's pretty even. I did not read any non-binary or some other spectrum. It might be a goal for that, to try and read more outside of these two genders, but right now I don't think that is a goal for me. If we take a look at the gender split over time, it's gotten a little bit more even, actually, as the years have gone by. I still read fewer books from female authors than male, but it's a much smaller gap than it was in 2018 and 17. I also took a look at the author split for just fantasy, since I read a huge chunk fantasy. It's actually kind of interesting to me, because I actually read fewer fantasy books by female authors in 2019, but in 2018 and 17, I read more by female authors instead of male authors. I don't know if that's just because of the manga I was choosing or where that difference comes from, but I think that's a little bit interesting, that flip there. And then just some quick, really kind of fun year type reading things. So my average reading year in 2019 was 2010. That's pretty much in line with 2018 and 2017, where the average reading years were 2012 and 2011. It's not really that much different. The oldest book I read was published in 1920, and that is The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. For new releases in 2019, I read 16. That's not crazy different from what I read in 2017 and 2018. 2018 was a little bit less at 7, and 2017 not much less with 11 new releases. And then the final thing I have to look at is just kind of a fun thing. It's not really much to do with it. But in 2019, this is kind of the spread of the decades that I read. I keep track of more decades than this, but the oldest I read was in the 1920s. So you can see I predominantly read in the 2010s and the 2000s, and not really much older than that. Doesn't mean I don't want to read more older books, but newer books are definitely a little bit easier for me. Again, this could be a thing that I want to expand on in the future, but right now it's not a huge priority. Anyway, those are all the different stats that I have. I think it's really interesting to go over all of these things. It's just, even if I don't do much with them, it's just kind of interesting to see the types of things I pick up and read. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. And I hope to see you again in another video. Bye!